So a very good evening to all. I welcome you to the 18th action of 22 actions for biodiversity. Today's action is support biodiversity friendly companies. Under this, we are organizing this webinar on access and benefit sharing. We have with us our chief guest, Mr. Justin Mohan, Secretary, National Biodiversity Authority, Government of India, Dr. Neelima Jairath, Director General, Pushpa Gujarat Science City, Dr. J. Sondra Pandey, Project Officer, Biodiversity Finance Initiative, National Biodiversity Authority, Government of India, and DGM PGSC, Shri Shiraj Batish. Now I request Dr. Neelima Jairath, Director General, Pushpa Gujarat Science City, to please welcome our guests and set the stage. Ma'am, please.
Thank you so much, lovely. A very good afternoon, everybody. A very good afternoon, Mr. Justin Mohan, Mr. Sondra Pandey, dear students, their teachers, their mentors. So at the outset, I would like to inform you that Pushpa Gujarat Science City has been celebrating International Biodiversity Day through a 22-day campaign, which will culminate on the 22nd. And every day, as suggested by CBD, we have been religiously doing one activity and posting that on social media. I know that you have been watching some of our social media posts. Thank you very much for your time. And I must also appreciate at the outset the effort which the teachers, the mentors, and the students are putting it into this campaign, because they have been associated with us, and every day they do something new and they come back to us. So it is really commendable. I must commend the teachers first, who have actually motivated all these students. I would also like to tell you, sir, that we have set up clubs in schools and colleges, and we call them as SD Ask clubs. So which are basically sustainable development, attitude, skill, and knowledge clubs. So most of these students, or rather many of these students, are part of this club. Many are not part of this club, but they are all interested into biodiversity. And I'm sure that these past 17 days, today is the 18th day, it has been a good learning experience for them as well. Well, sir, we are extremely very honored to have you here, Mr. Justin Mohan, with us today. I know you are extremely busy. You have your own programs as well, but you found out time for us. Thank you so very much for that. And friends, let me tell all of you that Mr. Justin Mohan is a very fine, very hardworking, and a very fair officer, the way I have known him. And I must say that the National Biodiversity Authority has undergone a sea change since he has joined as Secretary of the Authority. I must also welcome here Mr. J. Sondra Pandey. I have been in touch with Mr. Sondra Pandey since the past, I think, more than 8 years. He is the project manager of the ASEAN India Cooperative Project of the National Biodiversity Authority. And both our speakers today are not only experts in various aspects of biodiversity, they are specifically great experts, or the best experts in India on access and benefit sharing. Now, for the children, for you, all these days, you have been learning about biodiversity. You have a fair idea of what all is included in biodiversity. You also know that the Convention of Biodiversity has identified or has recognized that every country has a sovereign right on its bioresources. For example, the rights which countries exercise on their physical resources, similar rights are now exercised on biological resources also. So, it becomes a primary responsibility of all of us. And that is what the Biological Diversity Act also says, that we need to conserve our biodiversity. We need to ensure that it is used sustainably. And we also need to ensure that the benefits of biodiversity are equitably shared. Now, the access and benefit sharing guidelines have been developed, and these guidelines actually provide they define the mechanism to ensure this equitable sharing. You would recall that in past, some of these days, we have been informing you that biodiversity provides us a lot of tangible as well as intangible resources. And it is believed that just the services which biological resources provide amount to $125 trillion per year. So look at the amount of benefit which we get from biological resources. And it has been calculated that if you invest 1 rupee in conservation of biodiversity, you get a benefit of 9 rupees. So 9 times benefit is available. And that benefit also, part of it comes in terms of the resources which we can harvest and which we can use commercially. But when we get a benefit, when a company uses biodiversity commercially and gets a benefit, it is important that the communities which conserve those resources, they also get a small share. And that is the simplest concept of access and benefit sharing. Our 2 experts today would tell us about this concept and will explain to us how access and benefit sharing is important for conservation of biodiversity and how does it ensure sustainable use. Since the experts are already here, I would not like to say anything more than this, except that as we have been practicing all these 17 days and will continue to practice even after this campaign is over, we need to remember that nature cannot be pushed beyond its limits, should not be pushed beyond its limits. Whatever actions we take, it has to be within the carrying capacity of our ecosystems. And we need to conserve our biodiversity, and we need to ensure that there is no biodiversity loss. In fact, we improve our biological resources. So with this, I would like to hand over to the anchor, and I would request the anchor to immediately invite our experts because they are the best in the field at the moment, not only in India, but across the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your words of wisdom. So dear participants, we are very much honored to have with us Mr. J. Justin Mohan as a chief guest. Mr. J. Justin Mohan belongs to the 1999 batch of the Indian Forest Service. He joined as Secretary National Biodiversity Authority in September 2019. He was earlier heading the Kerala Soil Survey and Soil Conservation Department, Groundwater Department, and State Horticulture Mission concurrently since September 2015, before joining the National Biodiversity Authority. He is a recipient of several awards. To cite a few: the Global Tiger Forum Award, Wildlife Trust of India Award, the Nilgiri Wildlife Prize for contributions to wildlife conservation, and many more. I invite Mr. J. Justin Mohan to kindly address our participants. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam. Respected Director General of Pushpa Gujaral Science City, Dr. Nilima Jarath, and all the staff of the Science City of Kapurthala, and all the participants who are participating in this wonderful program today evening. Thank you for taking out your time and then participating in this program. From my side, I would also express my sincere thanks to Pushpa Gujaral Science City for inviting National Biodiversity Authority for this wonderful program. As Madam had earlier informed, the Convention on Biological Diversity had initiated a campaign of 22 actions for individuals, groups, and government organizations, coinciding with the International Day for Biological Diversity that is going to be celebrated on 22nd May of this year. So as part of that, right from day one, that is May 1st, every institution or every individual was given an option of undertaking some activity as part of biodiversity conservation. And I think, as per my knowledge goes, only Pushpa Gujaral Science City has religiously followed the instructions of CBD and organized this program for all these 22 days. And today we are on the 18th day of this campaign. And the organization has very nicely shortlisted a topic for supporting biodiversity compliant companies under the access and benefit sharing mechanism. So this is not a very difficult concept to understand. ABS, or access and benefit sharing, as the word indicates, means that any individual or any organization or any company who wants to access biological resources will have to share a small portion of their gains or profits which they get from their business on account of using such biological resources to the people who provide these resources. Mainly, these communities live in forests because majority of the raw material for industries requiring biological resources come from forest ecosystems or from rural areas. So predominantly tribal communities and farmers provide these raw material for such industries. And the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is part of the United Nations Environment Program, had actually requested all the 196 countries which are parties to this convention to enact suitable legislations to ensure that there is a fair and equitable sharing of benefits between the users and providers of biological resources. Accordingly, India, which is also a party to the Convention on Biological Diversity, or CBD, enacted the Biological Diversity Act in 2002. But if you go back to the history of forest governance or biodiversity governance, India has always recognized the rights and privileges of our indigenous communities, whether it is Indian Forest Act or Wildlife Protection Act or Forest Rights Act or PPVFRA Act or Forest Conservation Act. You take any act which is linked to forests or wildlife ecosystems, then the rights and concessions of the communities which are actually conserving or preserving these forests are already inbuilt. But the Biological Diversity Act, for the first time, made it explicit that if you want to conserve our biodiversity and also ensure that there is a sustainable flow of such biological resources to industries, then there should be a fair and equitable sharing of benefits by the people who are using such resources. So the companies can always claim that we are already purchasing these resources at the site from the traders or from the communities directly. So why we should pay once more in the form of access and benefit share? The logic is very simple. It is an incentive to the conservers or to the farmers to take an added interest or an added effort to conserve or protect or propagate these species. That is the logic. And once the farmer knows or the tribal community knows that I am getting an added incentive on account of conserving a particular species, he will take more interest to protect this. That is the idea. So the Biological Diversity Act has inbuilt this concept as part of its objective. And you also should be aware about the Nagoya Protocol, which came in 2014, to which also India is a party. And that gave legal certainty to this ABS concept. Now, as part of the Act and subsequent to the Nagoya Protocol, India notified the ABS regulations in 2014, and according to which any person or any entity or any company who is accessing or obtaining any biological resource, it may be plants, it may be animals, or it may be any microorganisms or their parts or byproducts, then they have to take the prior approval of the National Biodiversity Authority or the State Biodiversity Board. And whenever the NBA or the State Biodiversity Board accords approvals, it is in the form of agreement. And as part of the agreement, the user will have to indicate how much share of the profits they are going to share to the communities via the NBA or SBB. The National Biodiversity Authority or the State Biodiversity Board act as some sort of a liaison, some sort of a defense for the people who are living in the forest. They are the voice for these voiceless people. They sign the agreements on behalf of these tribal communities or farmers. And the companies or entities who are accessing these resources hand over the benefit sharing to the NBA, which in turn hands over this amount to the communities. Now, whenever the benefit claimer is known, we directly hand over the amount to that particular person or to the particular family. Whenever it is not known, then we hand it over to the Biodiversity Management Committee, which is functioning in every local body, in every village. So the Biodiversity Management Committee can decide on how to use the amount. There are two options before them, either to conserve the species for which they got the ABS amount, or they can use it for any socio-economic development of that particular village. The SBB has an added provision. They can also use this amount for identifying and protecting biodiversity heritage sites. So there is another option for the SBB to utilize this ABS amount, apart from the other provisions of helping the benefit claimers as well as through the BMCs, they can help the village for any socio-economic development. Now, coming to how much is being levied as the ABS amount. The NBA, as per the notification of 2014, levies an amount of 0.1 to 0.5% of the sale value of the product of a particular company in a particular year, financial year. And if the sale value is up to 1 crore, they have to pay 0.1%. It is roughly about 10,000 rupees. If it is between 1 crore to 3 crore, they have to pay 0.2%. If it is more than 3 crore, they have to pay 0.5%. Now the companies also have the option to pay based on the purchase price of the raw material. Then in such cases, they have to pay between 3 to 5% of the cost of the raw material. Now the Act regulates 4 types of activities. One is the research. If anyone wants to access any biological resource for research with a commercial motive, then the National Biodiversity Authority will levy an upfront payment for such people. For the purpose of research, Indians or Indian companies or Indian institutions are totally exempted. It is only the foreign companies or multinational companies who will have to take the approval and pay the benefit share. The second activity which is regulated under the Act is the commercial utilization. So anyone who uses a biological resource for a commercial purpose and is gaining some profit, then they have to pay the benefit sharing. Third is, if someone wants to take a patent, any intellectual property right on a biological resource, then again they will have to pay the ABS, access and benefit sharing amount, to the NBA or to the SBB. Fourth is the transfer of research. If someone has undertaken any research, an Indian entity, and then if they want to transfer the research result to a foreign company or to a multinational company having a foreign link in their share capital or management, then again they have to take the approval from the National Biodiversity Authority. Now for the intellectual property rights, the patent holder will have to get the approval of NBA. And according to the agreement, they have to pay between 0.2 to 1% of the amount of sale value of the product. There is a higher benefit sharing levied for patent holders because they are going to get monopoly right for a particular product or process involving a biological resource. Suppose if I get a patent and then I do not want to commercialize that patent, I want to sell it or assign it to some third party, then I will have to pay a benefit sharing of up to 5%. Similarly, when I am going to hand it over to a third party, I am entitled to get a royalty on an annual basis. Again, on that royalty, I have to pay 5% as benefit share. The concept of ABS, access and benefit sharing, is the hallmark of the Biological Diversity Act. It is a core component of the Biological Diversity Act. And whatever biodiversity conservation or sustainable use of biological resources depends on this ABS mechanism. Till date, National Biodiversity Authority has collected about 150 crore as access and benefit sharing amount from various companies and institutions. Now coming to how National Biodiversity Authority or the State Biodiversity Board help biodiversity friendly companies. So as per law, as on date, every company which is using biological resource has to take the prior approval from the National Biodiversity Authority or the State Biodiversity Board. If they are not taking the approval, it constitutes a criminal offense and they are liable to be punished with fine and imprisonment. Now, many companies, particularly multinational companies, come and take the approval because 196 countries across the world are parties to the CBD, Convention on Biological Diversity. Unless they are CBD compliant, their products may not be accepted in another foreign country. So invariably they come to NBA and take the approval. So as part of our friendly relation to such companies, we have installed an ABS software to ensure that the applicants or the companies can directly apply in online mode, and also for NBA, the time for processing such applications will be drastically reduced. As on date, we try to grant approval within 1 month from the date of receipt of any application from any company. The reason for 1 month is because for NBA as well as the State Biodiversity Board, we also have to discuss it with the BMCs concerned or to the SBB concerned. So we give about 2 to 3 weeks for the State Biodiversity Board to accord concurrence for any application. The State Biodiversity Board also in turn discusses with the Biodiversity Management Committees. Today we have about 276,000 biodiversity management committees established in our country. And every biodiversity management committee is expected to prepare a register, which is called the People's Biodiversity Register, to document all the biological resources in the jurisdiction of that particular village. So as on date, we have about 276,000 people's biodiversity registers as well. These registers help the biodiversity management committees to take a decision whenever there is a consultation process going on between the biodiversity management committee and the state biodiversity board. And the BMC also should be aware that these are the species available in my jurisdiction. And for your information, Biological Diversity Act is the only law in this country which accords protection for traditional knowledge associated with biological resources. So the People's Biodiversity Register also captures the traditional knowledge available in the country, which has been preserved for many centuries. So whenever a company wants a biological resource, they can either procure it from the village directly or through the traders. So traders form a very important link in the value chain of any biological resource. So trader is also expected to pay a benefit sharing under the ABS mechanism. He has to pay between 1 to 3% of the purchase price of the raw material. As part of building a friendly atmosphere with the companies, we generally try to accord approval within a month. Once the approval is granted, we also issue a certificate of compliance, which is also called as IRCC, internationally recognized certificate of compliance. Today, India has issued about 2,750 IRCCs to various companies who have taken approval from the National Biodiversity Authority. Globally, about 3,700 IRCCs have been issued. So India is a leader in the ABS mechanism. We have contributed to 72% of the IRCC's internationally recognized certificate of compliance globally issued across the world by another 195 parties to the CBD. Now, apart from this, the companies who are having these IRCCs get more visibility for their products because they now can claim that they are ABS compliant. From our side, NBI is also in the process of having a logo for all the companies who are ABS compliant, just like our ISI logo. We are creating a logo in association with QCI, Quality Control of India. So that should be issued anytime now. Once that is issued, then the companies who are taking the proper approval, they can also put the ABS logo on their products. So that they send the message to the people, citizens and communities that they are ABS compliant. So this is a broad idea of how this ABS system works. Now, according to me, ABS mechanism is a link, classical link between corporate India and rural India. It is an opportunity for the companies, for the corporates to help the rural people who are living in very marginalized conditions. So it is an opportunity for corporate India to share portion of their gains to help in the rural development of our own country. So this is a grand opportunity because other laws, when they are paying other forms of taxes, that goes into a common kitty and the company does not know how this is used. But here there is a direct mechanism where the company can tell NBA that these are the places from where I am procuring the resources. And this is the way I want to utilize the fund. And through the BMCs, we will implement the schemes that are actually recommended by the company. So the companies get an opportunity to help the people who help them in their business. So it's a very lovely concept, this ABS concept, in which corporate India can help our own rural people. So I stop here. I can take the questions later. I have with me Dr. Soundra Pandian, who is going to give a technical talk on this ABS mechanism. And I once again thank Pushpa Gujaral Science City for giving one day for the National Biodiversity Authority to participate in your 22-day event. I wish all the staff and also the DG of the Pushpa Gujaral Science City all the very best in your future endeavors as well. And I'm sure that you will be organizing a very grand program on 22nd May as part of the International Day for Biological Diversity. And this year's theme also is very lovely theme has been given to that we have to have a shared future for all life forms to sustain on Mother Earth. So I am sure that whatever efforts Pushpa Gujaral Science City is taking to celebrate the IBD, International Day for Biological Diversity, and to propagate awareness on the importance of biodiversity and the need to protect the biodiversity will go a long way to help in biodiversity conservation in our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for explaining our young participants about ABS in a simplified way on how NBA works for conservation of biological resources, its sustainable use, and equitable sharing of benefits accruing from the biological resources and traditional knowledge with the local communities. It has always been a pleasure listening to you. So dear participants, today we have Dr. Jayaram Sondrapandi as our expert speaker. Dr. Sondrapandi is a PhD in botany with specialization in plant taxonomy from the University of Madras. Since 2012, he is at MBA in various capacities. He was an expert consultant, project officer, biodiversity finance initiative, and as a project manager, Asian India Cooperation Project. Currently, he is the project officer in biodiversity finance initiative that is being implemented in 41 countries across the globe, including India, to create sustainable finance solutions to not only protect biodiversity, but let it flourish. So I invite Dr. Sondrapandi to please interact with our students. Sir, I would also request you, if possible, to communicate in English and Hindi mixed, since many of our participants are children from government schools. So if possible.
You should have told us earlier. I was not knowing actually.
If possible.
Okay. Madam, in the Q&A we can discuss in Hindi also. Whatever Hindi we know, we will discuss.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Madam, is the slide visible, madam?
Not yet.
1 minute, madam. Just give us 1 minute. Yeah. Just check, madam. Now.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam. I'll just thank our secretary and Madam Lovelin Brar and Madam Nilima Jarat for this initiative, because it's a very important initiative. What I'm going to do in next 15 to 20 minutes is that I will just substantiate what our secretary has detailed in a very finer manner. I'll just connect the biodiversity part of it, but through some pictorial kind of a representation, so that it always, stays in the memory of our students. That's my only attempt, madam. You all know that.
Sorry to interrupt, but can you please put your presentation on slideshow mode for better visibility?
Yeah.
Just a minute, ma'am. Just a minute.
కొంచెం తిరిగిట
Now our screen is visible, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Oh.
Okay.
Thank you so much, madam. As I was telling, basically, madam, for the students to understand easily, I'm just putting some pictures so that it stays in their memory. As our secretary was telling you, accession benefit sharing is a very, very simple concept, madam. It stems from conventional biological diversity. As we go along, I'll explain to you how conventional biological diversity is very unique as far as ABS is concerned. We can go to next slide, madam. You all know that it's a very simple definition, madam. Basically, if you are providing something for a commercial use, for an IPR, for a research, for a biosurvey and bioutilization, some amount of money has to flow back to the community. That's what access and benefit sharing is all about. And it recognizes two groups of people, madam. One is the user. Everybody knows the companies are users, commercial users. That's what I mean. And then the providers, as our sir was telling, the rural communities and tribal people are the providers. So the interaction between user and provider is facilitated through a concept called access and benefit sharing. This is where the NBA, SBB, the BMC, the UTBCs come as institutional players. We have the Biological Diversity Act, which is the legal player, legal instrument. So, madam, before we understand why we think about user and provider, people may think biodiversity is available everywhere. It is not so, madam. That's where the concept of mega diversity comes into picture. There are only a few countries that are known to host disproportionately more biodiversity. We call them as mega diverse countries. There are about 17 countries that are recognized as mega diverse. If you look at the global map, you'll find upper is the Tropic of Cancer, below is the Tropic of Capricorn. In between, you have the imaginary lines called equatorial lines. You will always biodiversity found more in the equator. If you look at the global map and if you look at the name the countries, you will also find that these countries are also very poor countries, but very rich in biodiversity, because in the equatorial region, we get more sunlight, we get more rainfall. So automatically the diversity in these places are very high. So that's what is the fundamental driving principle or the concept of ABS. As and when mega diverse countries like India is providing a European country like Germany or Denmark a biological resource for it to use commercially, then India should also benefit relatively little. So that is the overall concept, madam. We can go to the next slide. Now, madam, you know that biodiversity is not only important for commercial use, it is fundamentally important for Indians also. For example, you know that I was using the word mega diverse. India is only 2.4% of the global land area, madam. If you look at the biodiversity, it is roughly 78%. That is very disproportionately high globally recorded species, both plants and animals. If you look at the population, madam, India is not only 18% of the global population, we are also having 18% of the cattle population. That means in a small land, we are holding a large biological diversity. We are also supporting a large human and livestock population. We call them as livestock population. So you can imagine the kind of pressure that is on the land. So for India, biodiversity conservation is not a kind of an activity that can be done just like that, madam, legally or administratively. It's our livelihood security. That's what is the important thing. All our activities, all our the gross domestic product, all our industries depend on it. For example, where does the water come from? It comes from a forest. You have to retain some kind of biodiversity there, so that the biogeochemical cycles are interconnect. We go to the next slide. Madam, if you look at the tribal population of India, there are about 8%, nearly 800 million people directly depend on forest, madam. You see the right side picture. If you go to central India, anywhere in Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Orissa, you will find these tribal people collecting. Say, for example, the lady that is carrying the leaf is a beedi leaf, madam, Diospyros melanoxylon. And the other girl carrying is a jackfruit. So you can imagine their day-to-day livelihood is completely or fully dependent on the collection of non-timber forest produce. You cannot take away the tribal people. You cannot dissociate the tribal people and the plants, all the biological diversity from them. For example, you see the medicinal plant area, madam. You will find all the saracausa, all the things. In their day-to-day life, they are directly dependent on biodiversity for their survival, very survival. We call it as sustenance. In order for them to be alive, they need to be dependent on biodiversity. You go anywhere in central India, this is a situation. This is a kind of a direct provisioning service provided by the biological diversity. So their livelihood options are fully dependent on biodiversity. This is where you have to understand the concept of ABS. What they simply get from selling these products is only what we call is a transaction cost, the collection cost. The BD may be sold for a very high price, but these are tribal people. They may not be aware what is the real cost of these things. There are several examples like salt, seed, and other things, but I don't want to get into the details. But I want you to understand that for Indian population, for a vast majority of the Indian population, their livelihoods are directly dependent on the biological diversity available in their vicinity. We can go to the next slide. Not only the tribal people, madam, you look at India's industrial sector or the agricultural sector. Everybody knows Punjab is known for its the agriculture productivity in wheat, maize, and other things. For us to have a self-sufficiency in food and medicine, we are fully dependent on medicinal plants, agricultural crops as well as other medicinal plants. For example, you look at the health and pharmaceutical sector, madam. Everybody knows we are fully dependent during the COVID. Everybody understood the importance of a very simple tablet called paracetamol. It comes from a plant called Salix alba. Salicylic acid is getting converted into paracetamol tablet. You can imagine the sale value of that is really 1,000 crore, madam. I was told it's 1 rupee only, but you can imagine our dependence on biodiversity is very much. Even our industrial biotech sector, for example, even for production of insulin related material, we are fully dependent on biodiversity. Not only people are directly dependent, the industry that we work, the communities that depend on fully further depends on biodiversity. You remove biodiversity from the livelihood of people, you will not get anything, madam. That's the key message I want to give you. Next slide. Now, madam, you look at the diversity of Indian plants, you will find that there are about 49 species of plants are available in India. I said there are about 7 to 8% of the recorded flora of India. Globally recorded flora is available in India. Out of the 49,000 plants, people invariably use, the tribal people, all people use nearly 3,000 plant species for their tribal medicine, for Ayush medicine. We have an entire system of Ayush system, all we call them as ISM, Indian Systems of Medicine. Siddha, Ayurveda, Unani, homeopathy also fully depends on medicinal plants. But if you look at the calorific dependence, there are about 3 to 15 crops, madam. Nearly 60% of our calories come from only 3 crops. The rice, maize, and wheat. That's all. Everybody knows Punjab is a rice and wheat producing country. So our dependency is on very few number of crops. We cannot go on like that. Everybody understood during COVID. It takes this one species to disrupt the entire global functioning. We can go to next slide. So we must understand that biodiversity is fundamentally important. India is not only rich in biodiversity. You also know that India is also very rich in agricultural biodiversity. This is very important because all our food crops come from the agrobiodiversity. In fact, India is called one of the Babylonian centers of origin, and India is home to a large number of agricultural, horticultural crops. I just want you to understand that India is an agrobiodiversity hotspot as well. We call it as a cradle of the flowering plants. We go to the next slide. Now, madam, I was telling you India is very rich in agrobiodiversity. How can I substantiate it? You look at the mango variety available in one small place in Karnataka, Sirsi, you will find that there are several varieties of local mango bred by the farmer themselves. For example, in India, everybody says there are about 1,500 land races. Basically, land race means what people do in their own farmland. It's not a cultivar. Cultivar comes from an agricultural system, cultivated variety. That means you bred 2 parental lines, you come up with a new variety. That's called cultivar. These are all land races. That means people themselves have created these varieties for their own reason. Some mango will be very sour in taste, some will be very sweet in taste, and for several reasons. Some will be very good for making pickles, some for jelly. So this intraspecific variation, intraspecific means variation that we find within the species, very unique to India. That's why India is insisting on ABS, because our biodiversity is not as simple like any other country. Indian people have interacted with biodiversity in a different way, and we have a huge knowledge about these biological resources. This is the best example that we have, madam. I'll give you some more examples. Next slide. For example, you go to the Wayanad region, madam. Wayanad and Koraput are known to be the cradle of rice cultivation, rice species, Oryza sativa. We don't call them as Oryza sativa. It's Oryza species. You find so many. In one place in Wayanad, we have 20 different varieties of land races of wild rice. So these are all several of them have medicinal value. So this variety has to be conserved. And that's why we say that in India, we are not only rich in species diversity, our intra-specific variation among the species, within the species is very much high compared to any other part of that. That's why India is a mega diverse country. You take Garcinia or citrus, we have a huge diversity of crop plants. Next slide. And madam, what are we doing? Well, actually, how does this biodiversity, this traditional knowledge get conserved? This is where we must understand it's not only Indian concern, it's a global concern as well. I will show you some slides to illustrate that. But since World War II, post World War II, we created a lot of multilateral environmental agreements. If you sign an agreement between India and Pakistan, two countries, then it becomes bilateral. If you sign it among different countries like CBD, we call it as a near universal convention, because nearly, except America, 196 parties have already become party to signed the CBD agreement. So everybody understands the importance of this particular convention. That's why it is one of the very important conventions. You have several conventions. As we move along, I'll tell you, madam. We can go to the next slide. There are about 7 biodiversity-related conventions that are very important. Each one has a unique thematic area. For example, CBD, ABS is very important. CBD says countries have sovereign rights over biological resources. You take CITES, madam. CITES is another important convention. It talks about trade of endangered species of flora and fauna. If you want to trade on a particular species which is endangered, which is threatened, then you have to follow certain procedures. That is detailed in this CITES. You take Convention on Migratory Species. Everybody knows about Amur falcon. It is traveling from Central Asia to India. It comes up to Tamil Nadu, Vedanangal. We have to protect that species. Then we have to have an agreement. Whenever these birds travel from one place to another place, there has to be a protection that is offered to them. We call it as a CMS convention. Then World Heritage Convention. Kaziranga is a World Heritage Site. It is not only a natural site, it is also a heritage site, because you will not find the rhinos, one-horned rhino, anywhere else in the Asian region except in Kaziranga. Only in 2 places, Kaziranga and Manas. And then you will find the subspecies only in Africa. You don't find them in any other country in the world. You don't find it in Indonesia, Malaysia, Sarawak, Vietnam. No, we don't have rhinos there. Only in the Kaziranga. That's why we call it as a World Heritage. And then we have Ramsar, madam. Ramsar is a wetland site. Everybody knows the importance of wetlands. Wetlands are water sponges. Anywhere you have a wetland, the water table in that area will be very well protected. So we have a Ramsar site. Then we have the International Plant Protection Convention. See, we cannot simply take plant from one country to another country, because anytime you take a live material, it always has some pests and other things. It creates a very dangerous situation. Then we have the ITPGFRA. All these multilateral environmental agreements have very, very unique ideas about it, very, very unique principle about it. Each one caters to a particular idea. That's why we call them as biodiversity-related conventions. We can go to the next slide. Madam, I'll talk about CBD in a little bit detail, because this happened in 1992. Everybody knows it. And it was one of the landmark events in the history of humankind, I would say. Go as far as we call it as a Earth Summit. So under this 1992 convention, Rio Convention, we signed 3 important treaties. Today, you go to you take any environmental dialogue, you will find 2 words repeatedly mentioned, or 3 words you can go. The first word is the climate change. The second word is the biodiversity. Third word is the desertification. These are all interlinked. Actually, climate change is the dealing with the atmospheric things. Desertification deals with land things. What is connecting atmosphere and the land is the biological diversity. We must understand the importance of biodiversity, because all the 3 are interlinked. You cannot have a biodiversity without land. You cannot have a climate change without addressing the biodiversity-related issues. You keep on deforesting your area, like in Amazon, what is happening? You clear the forest. Automatically, climate change will come into picture, because we will not have carbon sink. So these are all interrelated conventions. But you can imagine in 1992, the global community came together and they signed these 3 important agreements, out of which one is the topic of today's discussion, which is the Convention on Biological Diversity and the Biological Diversity Act. Next slide. And one of the, as I was repeatedly telling, access and benefit sharing is very unique to Convention on Biological Diversity, because before 1992, everybody thought all the plants and animals belong to humankind. Basically, anybody can access any biological resource. You can simply take something from America, come to India and eat it. Like that, it happened, madam. For example, you know that our potatoes that we eat today, it came from Andean mountain. That the wheat material, the dwarf wheats, the Mexican, we call it as a Mexican dwarf. The dwarf wheat variety that is cultivated by Punjab farmers, it comes from Mexico, which is a South American country. So there was a free exchange before 1992. I have, in one of the slides, I told you all the diversity countries, mega diversity countries are very poor countries. This is where the negotiation took place to say that we hold the maximum biodiversity, but we remain poor. What are you going to do to address? If I give you biodiversity, what will you give me in return? This is where the concept of ABS is located. In return, something has to be given to the developing countries, or they provide us who are giving this biodiversity to the developed countries or the industries. That's the key thing I just want to say. And CBD also told about sovereign rights, madam. It's a very important word. We can go to next slide. Sovereignty is part of the conventional biological diversity. Every country has the right to govern its own biodiversity. If I want to prohibit, if India wants to stop it, any of its natural resource flowing to any other country, we can do that. Actually, pre-CBD era, everybody thought biological resource is a common property resource. We call it as a CPR. All biodiversity belongs to everybody, but it is not so. After CBD came into picture, the biodiversity belongs to a particular country in which it is occurring. That is a keyword. If you are getting a bioresource from a particular country from which it is occurring, you have to compensate that country. And I was repeatedly telling you, world's biodiversity lies in poorer countries, particularly in the equatorial region between Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. So these poor countries have to make use of the biodiversity that is available with them to enrich themselves, to develop themselves. That is the key concept of ABS, madam. Why I should, it's not for simply taking a few thousand rupees, a few crore rupee, that the ABS is there. It's a huge concept. Even IPR is a kind of a form of an ABS. You have to give me intellectual property right. I will give you bioresource, you give me some part of your right, whatever you are doing. That is coming in the last paragraph. If you are doing something relating to pharmaceutical, nutraceutical, cosmetics, biotechnology, we can go as far as to demand an IP rate from them. For example, somebody is preparing a COVID vaccine using Indian biological resource, then we can claim, as per the Nagoya Protocol, a joint right, joint intellectual property right. So basically, local communities also have to be compensated. At the same time, nations have to be compensated. Everybody knows about the COVID vaccine availability. African countries did not get much, though everybody knows Africa is very rich in biodiversity because they don't have a proper legislation and their the negotiating power is very poor. They could not succeed, but you know that biodiversity in Africa is very rich, as like in many of the Southeast Asian countries. We can go to the next slide. That's where biological diversity is important. See, Article 15.1 recognizes sovereign rights of states. Actually, every country has the right and the authority to determine the access and subject to national legislation. National legislation is what when we signed the conventional biological diversity, India came back and they enacted a national legislation called the Biological Diversity Act. And all the access and benefit sharing, it should be based on mutually agreed term and prior informed. You cannot do anything without the agreement of the communities. I cannot simply touch you without your permission. That's the kind of agreement is what envisaged under the Convention on Biological Diversity. Next slide. Now you know that there are about protocols written. You have the convention, you have the protocol, you have the act, and you have the regulation. The Cartagena Protocol and Nagoya Protocol are two important protocols associated with conventional biological. The Cartagena Protocol deals with biosafety. We call it as a biosafety with living modified organisms. We call it as the genetic engineered crops, varieties, things like that. As and when you do genetic engineering with a particular crop, a tomato, a mustard, or a cotton, when you release it, you have to follow certain precaution because you have modified the original form of a particular crop. What happens, how the crop will behave in the wild, we don't know. So there are procedures to be followed. That is detailed in Cartagena Protocol. Nagoya Protocol, you know by now that it deals with accession benefit sharing. We can go to next slide. So basically, it's a very simple philosophy. Our secretary has already detailed you. See, conservation and sustainable use will be enhanced, will be promoted if there is a accession benefit sharing, if there is a fair and equitable sharing of benefits happening to the communities and the countries. That's a key principle, madam. Next slide, please. So this is how it is happening. For example, you take a group of villagers who are conserving variety of a paddy. And if they know that there is a commercial value, if somebody wants to commercially use it, if these village people are compensated, then they have an added incentive to conserve these varieties. Otherwise, these varieties will simply disappear. For example, everybody knows what is happening with our cattle breeds. Many of our cattle breeds, in our enthusiasm to increase milk productivity, we imported a lot of the American and German breeds of cattle. and we lost majority of our traditional cattle because they don't yield that much milk, but they are adapted to the local conditions. They have the genetic tolerance, they have the genetic ability to withstand any climate change that is happening in India. For example, you cannot rear a Jersey or a Holstein. Nowadays, many people in southern India, they use air conditioning to rear those things. That much effort is required. But for these crops, native varieties, our effort is very minimal. They are tolerant, they are adaptable. Next slide we can do. This is where not only the villages are conserving, today the global community is very concerned about the disappearance of gem blossom from the face of the earth. For example, everybody must have heard about this global seawall that is being, it's a kind of a natural cryopreservation. Normally, if you want to conserve a biological resource in its original form, you go for a cryopreservation. We call this preservation techniques under minus 150 degrees centigrade, minus. This is available naturally in the Norwegian wetlands, westlands. So basically, they are simply conserving this biological resource in the icy mountains so that it can be preserved for a posterity. Nearly 9% of our biological resource is available in is belonging to India. But another important aspect of Biological Diversity Act is the not only preserving the varieties in different scientific techniques, it is also keeping a record of what species we had. That's where the concept of BBR came. PBR is also very intricately linked with the accession benefit share, because everybody should know what bioresource is available in the vicinity of a particular locality. And there should be a biodiversity management committee should be there, and they should prepare the PBR so that the accession benefit sharing can be linked. It's a kind of a three-pillar kind of a thing, so that BMC, ABS, and PBR, if they are linked, and then our conservation efforts will go greatly, will be enhanced greatly. Another important thing is that our biodiversity not only resides in our forests, mountains, and in the oceans. Our biodiversity is also with the people. I have told you innumerable examples of the agrobiodiversity, citing some examples from mango varieties in Sirsi or the citrus varieties in Northeast. We also have a lot of varieties even in camel. For example, you go to Rajasthan, you will find camel varieties being protected by the Raika people using the biocultural community protocol, which is a form of a PBR. Basically, whatever they have, they simply document it. Here, the community part is very important. See, because communities conserve whatever is useful to the community, the people always take a lot of effort to conserve that particular biological resource. That's a very important thing for us to understand. And you know that as a party to CBD, India has enacted the Biological Diversity Act, and we are nearly 20-year-old act. And another important example I want to give you about the ABS is that India is the first country that has done it even before CBD happened. For example, in 1987 itself, we did, everybody talk about CBD came in 1982. If you look at this Connie TPGRI model, you'll find that in 1987 itself, India has already started doing this benefit sharing with an indigenous community. TPGRI is nothing but the Tropical Botanic Garden Research Institute. It is situated near Thiruvananthapuram in the Western Ghat slopy mountains. And what happened is that there resides a tribal community, the indigenous community called Connies. Basically, they are semi-nomadic tribals. They are found in the Agastyamalai hill region of the southern Western Ghat, one of the biodiversity hotspots of the world. And these people have a lot of indigenous knowledge about plants that are available there. For example, these people have a huge stamina. Even if they walk for 10-20 kilometers, they don't get tired at all. They used to take one small fruit and a root of a particular plant. I'll show you the plant. And they were found to be very energetic. So basically, they were agile. And these scientists were very surprised about these tribal people being very agile throughout the day. So they just wanted to know what is that you are eating to keep you very agile and very energetic. That's how came this Connie TPGRI model. This is the plant they were found to be eating, and it's called Trichopus zeylanicus. In their language, we call it as Jivani. They are the Arogya Pacha. Arogya, everybody knows Arogya is, I think it's a Sanskrit word saying health. So basically, in order to keep you healthy or energetic, use the root of this plant, simply chew it, and you'll be energetic throughout the day. And that's how the Connie TPGRI model came. In fact, we have to appreciate KPGRA because even in early 1990s, before CBD came into picture, before BDI came into picture, they went ahead and they patented the TPG, this particular drug, and they filed a patent using RRL Jammu, and they gave right to the Khani tribes also. In fact, a huge amount of money was also given to them as part of the transferring the right, and a drug Jivani was prepared using this, and it is even today it is sold by one Ayush company called Adivita Pharmacy from Kerala. Basically, Adivita Pharmacy is still holding the right. As and when they manufacture the drug, they sell it in the market. A part of the portion which our secretary was telling, 0.1 to 0.5%, some money will flow to the tribal community even today, if as and when the RK Bacha is used and a drug Jivani is made. This is a classical example how India was always far-sighted in conserving, rewarding, and recognizing our communities. So this is a 1990s case. Our act came only in 2002 and 2004. I just thought, as a student community, you must know that the conservation of biological diversity is very much ingrained in the ethos of the Indian people. So we all should take pride that India is having this legislation, and India is having the state biodiversity boards, biodiversity management committees, the biodiversity management councils, so that the biological diversity is well protected. And I'm just putting this as a last slide. Biodiversity is life, biodiversity is our life, because we cannot do anything without the biodiversity, protecting the biodiversity surrounding us. I will just complete it here so that a students community can ask some questions to our secretary, and we will answer it collectively. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for this captivating and insightful presentation. Now the platform is open for questions. Students who would like to ask questions, please raise your hands. We will unmute you, or you can drop the question in the chat. I repeat, please raise your hands if you want to ask any question, or drop the question in the chat. So you may please unshare the screen.
Stop sharing it. So good.
Stop sharing. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Any child has a question, or did you find the subject easy or difficult?
Please raise your hands. Okay. There is a question in the chat from Bhumika. Sir, there are some very old, maybe 150-year-old trees in our area. What can be done to protect them? How can Biodiversity Act help?
Is it one tree or a group of trees?
So it is 150-year-old.
Only one tree.
No, sir, more than one tree. It is a garden.
One tree.
Then the Act has given a provision to declare such areas as biodiversity heritage site. So once we notify it as a biodiversity heritage site, then the state biodiversity board can utilize part of the amount which they receive as ABS amount for the maintenance or protection of such biodiversity heritage site. From NBA, we are giving 1 lakh to prepare a small management plan to manage this biodiversity heritage site. So what you can do is that if it is, say for example, this area is say 50 cents or so, and if you feel that these are all 150-year-old trees and has to be protected, so you give a request to the state biodiversity board to notify it as a biodiversity heritage site. Till now, to my knowledge, there is no biodiversity heritage site in Punjab. So probably this could be the first biodiversity heritage site in the state.
Okay, I hope Bhumika, your question has been answered.
I
So-
would just like to add something to this. Secretary NBA knows that there is a orchard, a mango orchard, which is known as Inami Bagh, which has got the Desi variety of mangoes in Punjab, in Hoshiarpur. I really don't know how many of you children know about this, but this orchard has got about 37 varieties of Desi Tapka mango. So there had been some efforts to get it converted into a biodiversity heritage site, which could not happen. So now this is just for information of everybody that we took up the matter with the Punjab Agriculture University, their Department of Horticulture, and now they are preserving the germplasm of those trees.
And, good news, madam. Happy news.
So the next question is from Lokesh. Lokesh, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was really great session. So thank you for the organizers as well as for all the presenters. So I work for a company. So I just want to understand, this is really a great act, and I see a lot of enforcement happening in the last 4 5 years. So that's really amazing. So my couple of questions are, for example, the millets, because as earlier we know, only 3 crops becomes the major part of our food plate. Now there are a lot of millets, major millets and the minor millets. If those millets we use in like suppose if we use it in biscuits, or suppose if we use it in chocolate or wherever it is, those things, whether does it come under the purview of BD Act, or those things will be excluded?
Okay. So, see, 421 species, which are predominantly cultivated as agriculture crops, horticulture crops, spices and condiments, and medicinal plants. They have been notified under section 40 of this act. These species are declared as normally traded as commodity species. So whatever species which you have mentioned falls under these 421 species. So they are exempted from the ABS provisions. So they need not take any approval from the National Biodiversity Authority or State Biodiversity Board. Is it audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, it is.
Hello. Yeah. Yes, sir. The 421 species are NTSC. Are there. So there, some of the millets are mentioned. One of the key thing is it is considered as a NTSC only when we use as a commodity. So now I'm using a combination of 4 5 millets into the biscuit. Whether that biscuit, I don't think it will be considered as a commodity, right? It will come outside the purview of.
You can see if anything is used by citizens, okay, as for consumption, we
Yeah.
do not expect the company to take any approval. Say, for example, from the species, if you are taking dye or a pigment or an enzyme or a drug, medicine, then you have to take the approval. But here you are only making biscuit. See, anyway, the millets are being consumed. So it is consumed in the form of biscuit. So you need not take any approval.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And my second question is on the sustainability, because for example, coffee or the tea, take any beverages. So there are technologies to reduce the waste in the factories, to reduce the waste or to improve the quality, sensors and all those things. So there it comes with the technology interventions. So whether now for those things, whether still it comes under the BD Act purview, because now we are an MNC company. We are working on coffee or the tea, and we'll have a patent on that. But those patent now just helps to reduce the waste or improve the process efficiency. Now, whether these patent, which is called a process patent, which is not a product patent, whether these things comes under the purview of this or how to deal this kind of thing.
Yeah, very much it will attract the BDI. See,
Hmm.
when tea or coffee is directly used for consumption or for trade, then it is completely accepted. It is notified under 421,
Yeah.
under the 421 species under section 40 of the Act.
Yeah.
But the moment you are going for a patent for some
Hmm.
process or product which is
Hmm.
normally not in use, so you are going to take a monopoly right over that product or process. Then necessarily you will have to take the approval of NBA. Only here the SBB does not come into play. So whenever you are applying for a patent, naturally the patent office will tell that you please go and take the approval of the National Biodiversity Authority. So definitely you have to compulsorily come to NBA and take the patent. Suppose the patent is granted unknowingly and you have not taken the approval of NBA, then it constitutes a criminal offense.
Hmm. Okay, sir. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Any other questions? Please raise your hands. Yes, there is a question in the chat from Ankit. Sir, we saw film on BMC. Do you have any film on ABS also?
No, we have made 3 films. One on the Biological Diversity Act, one on the PBR, People's Biodiversity Register, and one on the BMCs. So I think the ABS concept gets covered in all the 3 films. So we have not made a separate film for ABS. So if you see all these 3 small animated films, you get a broad idea of what is ABS.
And I think we did show them in one of the
Webinar.
days. We showed them, I don't know how many, but I think we showed them at least 2 films. I'm not sure if we showed them all the 3. Navleen will tell.
Sir, we had
For the-
the film on Biodiversity Act.
Okay.
For the ease of understanding, this ABS is like a bonus. Suppose a person is working for full 1 year in a company or in a government, and then the company says that okay, in Diwali we are going to give bonus because the company has made a lot of profit. So they are giving additional bonus to their employees. Similarly, in this case, they are giving bonus to the tribal communities and farmers for the effort they have taken to supply this raw material. So it serves as an added incentive. It is some sort of encouragement to perform more, to conserve that species more. Otherwise, what will happen is, suppose the companies know that a particular species has a commercial value. Say, for example, some particular X species, some species. Suppose a company comes to know that this species is the cure for corona disease, COVID. Then large-scale extraction will happen. Everyone will compete with each other and try to completely exploit that species, extract that species. Then in due course, that species is likely to become extinct. So when this ABS mechanism comes, so the people will know that I am getting an additional incentive bonus when I conserve this particular species. So they will take added effort, interest to protect it. They will not allow this species to get lost forever. That is the idea.
So, any other questions? Okay, there is a question in the chat box from Abhinav. Good evening, sir. I have a question. Do pharma companies pay ABS? Do local VADs also pay ABS?
Vaids and Hakims are exempted under this act. So any Vaid or Hakim in any village who is using biological resource for his own livelihood, then he is not, he need not take any approval from NBA or the state biodiversity board. Similarly, any farmer who is using biological resource for his own livelihood, he is also not required to pay any biological, any ABS. Similarly, any citizen, any country person, any person who is consuming a biological resource, he need not pay any ABS. Any trader who is selling a finally finished product, a value-added product, he also need not pay any ABS. So what was the first question?
Pharma companies.
For
Yes,
the
do pharma companies pay ABS?
pharma or farmers producer organization.
Pharma.
Pharma companies.
Pharma companies have to pay ABS because they use microorganisms to produce various antibiotics and drugs. So when microorganisms are used to produce any biological, to produce any drug or any medicine, then they fall under the ABS regime. They have to take the approval from the NBA, National Biodiversity Authority, or if they are purely Indian entity, then they have to take the approval from the State Biodiversity Board. But if it is a farmers producer organization, FPOs, generally in villages, the government of India is also promoting FPOs. So it is a company, a registered company. They register it under the agriculture department, and then a group of farmers produce a particular product. Because the Punjab is typically an agricultural dominated state. So a lot of FPOs will be there, farmers producer organizations. So because they are procuring and transferring it for their own livelihood, they need not be covered under this ABS regime. FPOs are not covered. But if a company is procuring from the FPOs, if a company is procuring, say, wheat or rice, and then they are going to make some dye or some pigment or some perfume or some other product, then they have to take the approval.
Abhinav, I hope we have got the answer. Any other questions? I hope no more questions. Thank you so much, sir, for answering all the questions so patiently. And it's time to wrap up. Now I request Shri Shiraj Bapish, DGM Pushpa Gujarat Science City, to propose vote of thanks. Sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Loveleen, for providing me opportunity to place a vote of thanks. I think today's stars has been added to our campaign of 22 actions for 22 days with the great words of wisdom and information shared by about access and benefit sharing ABS by our eminent speakers, Shri Justin Mohan and Dr. Sundarpade, for giving a wonderful, interesting and informative talks and taking out time from your busy schedule. The participants would have gained a lot about importance and procedures, how to share the sources and other biosources available in their areas, and must be gain the things, how the practically the things are being done, the practical knowledge that maybe they had shared. And I think the students are from the not that higher education stream, they must also have gained what the sources, biosources are there and how they are being shared, what are the procedures and those things. I think it had been, sir, a lot of informative talk about both of the speakers. We also sincerely thank Dr. Sundara Pandey for underlying the significance of ABC at national and international levels and their perspectives, and how it can be used to achieve the objectives of conservation and sustainability of use of bioresources and its adoption. Thanks a lot, sir, Dr. Sundarappa. I'm also very much thankful to and grateful to our worthy Director General, Dr. Nilima Jairath, who has been always motivating and encouraging us to organize this type of activities, so that the basic objective of Science City of creating awareness and inculcating scientific temperament among the public of the region can be achieved. Thanks a lot, ma'am, for your guidance for organizing such activities. I am thankful to our participants, students, teachers, and their parents whom without the program can't succeed. Their participation has really helps us, and they had been participating for this campaign regularly with us and encouraging us to organize such type of event. Thanks a lot, the students, the parents, and the teachers. I'm also thankful to our media partners who helped us to spread this message further indirectly to the public who was not able to join us today. Thanks. I'm also thankful to organizer Dr. Loveleen, Kamal, and our marketing team and the technical support team for organizing this event. I'm again thankful to Mr. Justin and Dr. Sundarappa for taking out time from your busy schedule to give such interesting and informative talk. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. We
Thank you,
know
thank you.
that the talk today, the topic was slightly higher for the children, but rest assured, day after tomorrow, we are having a nature walk.
Okay,
And
okay.
my scientists who would take up the nature walk, they will again discuss about these things, because in the Science City campus, the walk will be inside the campus. We have a 72-acre campus. So and we have we have a herbal garden, we have a lot of fruit trees here, and we have a lot of medicinal plants here. So I'm sure when they are having the nature walk, which would be conducted by my colleague, Madam Kamaljeet Kaur, I'm sure she will talk to students about this in the context of the fruits and the benefits which they see at the at PGSC campus.
Okay.
I'm sure it will help to further explain this concept to them. It's a simple concept once understood.
Okay, yes, ma'am. Yes. Not a difficult topic, but anyway, madam, thank you very much for organizing this wonderful 22-day program. It's a very long event. It's not an easy thing to.
But kudos to
22.
our children.
I think in India, no other organization is taking up this 22-day. Even India is not doing that. Or
Yeah.
none of the SBBs are doing. I think no other, to my knowledge, no other organization is doing it. I think hats off to Pushpa Gujaral Science City and to you and to your staff for it's a very very appreciative, commendable type of activities which you are doing. Anyway, carry on the good work, madam. One day we will come. Myself and Saudra Pandey will be coming to Pushpa Gujaral Science City to meet you personally.
Please do. And thank you very much, because without your support, we would not have been able to do it.
Yes, madam. Yes.
You
Always our
support
support will
us
be
very
there.
well.
Yes. Thank you, madam. Thank you to all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.